So, Ed, it's fair to say that we've spoken a lot about electric vehicles, EVs, and the batteries of those, and the need to create more efficient batteries, bigger batteries, to increase the range of the cars. But we haven't talked too much about the actual manufacturing process. Now, one of the most important materials when it comes to producing rechargeable batteries, whether that's in your car, whether that's in your phone or your laptop or anything in between, is cobalt. Now, there's been a lot said about this, particularly when it comes to the extraction of this material, and the methods that have been used are more than controversial, to say the least. But there are some interesting trends when it comes to cobalt recently. I mean, some surprising trends that we were just speaking about before recording here, that a lot of people won't really be aware of, I don't think.
Well, yeah, and it's true that electric vehicles, they play a significant role in driving the demand for cobalt, as cobalt's a key component in lithium-ion batteries. And 70%, roughly 70% of the supply comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo, or the DRC. So 20 to 30%, or roughly 10 to 20% of the global supply actually comes from these small mines that are called artisanal small mines. And they depend a lot on hand labor versus larger mines that might be very mechanized. Now, there are some good things about these mines because they do bring some economic benefits to areas that can use it. However, especially in the Congo, when it comes to cobalt, there are some human rights abuses, and primarily related to child labor, where the estimates are, and these estimates are hard to pin down because of the lack of transparency of what's going on in the Congo, but roughly anywhere between 10 to 40,000 children working in these mines. And there's a book called Cobalt Red, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives. It's by Siddhartha Kara. Great book. If you want to learn the details about what's going on there, it's a great expose. He talks about child labor, human rights, health and safety, environmental damage, and the economic exploitation that's occurring because of the lack of government action, corruption, that kind of thing. So definitely check out that book if you want to learn more details. So if we look at it from an EV standpoint, EVs, you can think of it like a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's supporting this transition to cleaner mobility, but cobalt is raising these ethical concerns, especially when it comes to child labor. So let's try and put this perspective. Like, what is the role that EVs are actually playing in driving demand for cobalt? How is this trending over the coming years? And really, the place to start off is, why do you even need cobalt? And the reason is, when you use cobalt in batteries, they have a much higher energy density. So that means more energy in less space, less weight, greater range for the EVs, especially on the premium side, where you want to put a lot of batteries, a lot of weight in them. So as the sale rate for EVs continues to grow, and it's roughly at about 20%. So now the rate of growth has gone down, but that 20% is still significant growth year over year, and that's what's expected. It's going to drive the demand for cobalt. However, although the rate for EV growth is around 20% for sales of new EVs, the growth for cobalt is not expected to keep up with that 20%. Some estimates say it could drop by at least half, and some as low as 5% by 2026. And this is driven by the battery producers, the car producers, the EV producers, to look for alternative materials. And this is because cobalt batteries cost more. The stability of the supply chain, and certainly all these ethical issues that we've been talking about. So these producers are looking at alternative chemistries, and the number one alternative, most common one, is lithium iron phosphate batteries, or LFP batteries. They're cheaper. They're better suited because of the lower cost to be used in smaller cars. However, this use in smaller cars is because they have lower energy density, which means they're going to weigh more. And if you can get away with a car that needs fewer batteries, like the smaller ones, it's going to be great. However, For the larger ones where you have a lot of batteries, they're going to tend to stay more with the cobalt batteries. But nonetheless, Tesla, for instance, by early 22 was using 50% LFP batteries in their cars. In fact, the Model 3 and the Model Y, the short range versions, actually use LFP batteries. And globally, it looks like roughly by 2023, 40% of the batteries that are in electric vehicles are non-cobalt batteries. So that's an increase of somewhere between 10 or 15%, even just if you go just a couple of years back. And if you look at China, which tends to have smaller EVs, they're two-thirds cobalt free. Now, in the long term, and here's where this uncertainty comes in as to the future demand for cobalt, batteries like solid state batteries, if the innovation, the development for batteries of that type come through, it's going to further drive this down. So the amount of cobalt that's needed is going to go up based on the demand for EVs, but the rate at which it'll go up will be less and eventually may even plateau depending on how innovations go. It'll be less than the growth in the EVs themselves. Now, cobalt is used in lithium-ion batteries, and although EVs are the greatest consumer, roughly a third, just under a third, goes into consumer products, laptops, phones, and the other third is for non-battery. So it is just as much impacted by the phones, roughly impacted just as much by the phones and the laptops that we use, as well as EVs. Now, child labor is not just used in cobalt mining, but for instance, in Africa, gold mining, the estimates are that roughly 1 million children are actually engaged in small-scale mining of gold in Africa. That compares to the 20 to 40,000 we mentioned for cobalt. And in gold mining, they're working with dangerous chemicals like mercury, which is used to extract the gold. So a lot of the gold that we have in jewelry, things like that, rely to a significant amount on child labor. But if you look at child labor overall, there's estimates are over 150 million children in the world that are being used illegally or are being used against their will in child labor. And by far, the largest segment there, roughly over 100 million, is in agriculture. So that could be chocolate, cocoa farming, sugar cane, coffee, fishing, shrimps, and even tobacco. So a significant, like I said, a significant amount of this labor is in agriculture, way beyond what is being used in mining, and certainly much greater than cobalt. So because of this significant problem, there's a lot of organizations around the world that are trying to do something about this. There's the Global March Against Child Labor, Good Weave, Love 146, and a big part of it is there are mines in the Congo that actually do not use child labor, and the ability to trace and ensure that there's ethical sourcing. That's a big part of what corporations now are trying to do because of the attention that's being brought to this, because of the consumer awareness, and certainly legislation and regulation is going to play a big part of this. So child labor is a serious issue. Certainly, the cobalt mining is contributing to this, but there are other much bigger ones that also need to be addressed. And this is going to take effort from government, from corporations, and from consumers to help ensure this. And it's important, I think, for everyone to support these initiatives. And EVs are allowing us here to give a reason to pay attention. And we should be debating the supply chain and the ethical issues that are related to that on EVs, just like we debate charging times and range and those kinds of things. They have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, it's a very complex issue. There's a lot of moving parts in it at the end of the day, a lot of aspects. And it is a very good point as well that you kind of bring up that it's terrible what's happening in some of these mines, but it's far from just the cobalt that's doing that. I mean, when you told me about there being 150 million children involved in, underage working, effectively, unsolicited working like that, child labor like that. It's a startling statistic. To put that in perspective, that's about double the population of my entire country, the UK, about half the population of Ed's country, the United States, and yeah, that's how many children are just working on this. So yeah, it's not great what's been happening with the cobalt mines. I mean, I listened to Joe Rogan's podcast when he had the author of that book on Cobalt Red. I've also listened to the book as well. It's a harrowing listen. It's good to see that it's projected that our reliance on cobalt for electric cars, at least, is projected to decrease. But like you said, it's not just that; it's also mobile phones. Like we said before we started recording as well. You know, most people don't have an electric car right now, but if they have an electric car, it's probably just one. But how many phones have people got? How many laptops have people got? How many tablets have people got? I mean, I've easily got 5, 6 devices in my house just for me that have all got a rechargeable battery and they all use cobalt. And I don't think they're meant to be changing to a different source for batteries for those anytime soon. I don't think that was established.
Well, yeah, and I think in the end, in order to solve a problem, you have to be aware of it. And that's where it starts. If you don't understand what the problem is, and I think being aware of how many of the things we use, be it batteries for electric vehicles or our laptops or our phones or what the things we eat, it's important to understand that, and then to take some steps. You can't solve it. We can't solve it on our own, but together, if we bring it to our attention, and like I said, take some kind of step if you can, to by the choices you make when you buy or other things that you might be able to do to help some of these organizations. I think that's the way forward.
It is, yeah, it is. It's all about visibility at the end of the day. People have to be aware of it, because if people aren't aware of it, then they're never going to know. Like you would never guess that's where these things come from. But when you actually do the research, it's a murky place where you end up at the end of the day. But I'm glad to see that things seem to be moving in the right direction and more people are becoming aware of it. I think it's got a way to go still, but end of the day, not everything's perfect. And at least EVs do, in the long run, as we spoke about before with crossover points and stuff like that. In the long run, in general, they are better for the environment. That is one thing, but the manufacturing of them, in certain aspects, I think it does need to change, and it is seeming like it's going to change.
Yeah, and when you go to buy your EV, if it's possible that you can buy one that has a battery, an LFP battery, for instance, that doesn't have cobalt in it, that's one way to help support the move away from these ethical concerns there are in how the minerals are mined and how those are used in the manufacturing of batteries. So a lot of little things add up in the end. So hopefully we've brought some attention to those today.
Hopefully, yes. Hopefully. And if you guys want us to answer any specific questions, feel free to leave us a comment in the on Microsoft or YouTube. This will be going on YouTube, I'm sure, as well. Just Ed is a former VP of Siemens Motorsports, so he's got a lot of knowledge on a wide array of subjects when it comes to motorsport and also automotive manufacturing like this as well. So yeah, just let us know if you've got any suggestions. And of course, there's many more conversations like this with me and Ed. You guys can have a look back on our archives for that on motoringchronicle.com, some on the F1 Chronicle as well. But yeah, well, make sure to catch us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Microsoft, like I said, YouTube as well, and of course the audio platforms as well. So yeah, we'll see you for the next one, guys.